Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Holy Blossom congregants, clergy, and guests. My name is Julie Solomon, and on behalf of the Sklar Mental Health Initiative Committee, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this evening's webinar on understanding dementia for you and your loved ones, with our expert speaker, Dr. Sarah Coleman. I'd like to now introduce you to Rabbi Zachary Goodman, Assistant Rabbi at Holy Blossom Temple, who oversees numerous programs at Holy Blossom, in particular, those that provide social connections and support within our community. Welcome, Rabbi.
Hello, Julie, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for your gracious introduction. And on behalf of Holy Blossom and the Sklar Mental Health Initiative, I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to join this important conversation. And I want to personally thank both Julie Solomon and Doreen Saskin, who not only helped in facilitating and bringing this program to us this evening, but also whose sponsorship gift has made this evening possible. So Julie and Doreen, thank you both for your generosity of time and resources and of spirit. I also want to thank the folks at Jewish Family and Child Services who have made available 3 different social workers to all of the registrants this evening. If you would like to connect with a counselor tonight or in future, please send an email to one of the addresses that we will be posting in the chat function now. Thank you to Deanna for doing that, I hope. And if you just reach out to one of the counselors and provide your name and phone number and contact information, that they will be able to reach you. We will also be sharing their information in a follow-up email in the coming days. So if you are not planning on contacting them tonight, that's okay. We'll send that information to you later. Alternatively, you can reach out to me at any time at zgoodman@holyblossom.org, and I can put you in contact with one of the counselors. Thank you very much. Before we hear from our keynote speaker, who we'll just introduce in just a few moments, I wanted to share a few thoughts on the role of memory and remembering for the Jewish community. So let's begin with the blessing for engaging with Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So the Jewish people have a reputation of being both a history-centered people and of holding long and tenacious memories. Social scientist Maurice Halbwachs introduced the notion of collective memory as transmitted and sustained through conscious efforts of individuals and institutions of a group. And for the Jewish people, collective memory flows through our rituals and recitations. Just last week, we commemorated Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of memory. And not only does the commandment Zachor, to remember, appear multiple times in the Hebrew Bible, but the Israelite nation is also actively instructed there not to forget. And many scholars argue that in English, the translation of Zachor as remember is actually too small in scope, arguing that rather the word implies a level of action, that remembering and memory in a Jewish lens is not really a function of the brain, but rather a Jewish process. And perhaps one of the Jewish people's greatest contributions to society at large is an insistence on the importance of remembering history and finding meaning within that history. So, for example, how we memorialize the Shoah and an examination of the numerous different Holocaust memorials is representative of how the Jewish community remembers and thinks about the Holocaust. So do these memorials emphasize the act of genocide, or the survivors, or the victims, or the rescuers, or non-Jews as well as Jews? These memorials stand as concrete examples of one aspect of Jewish collective memory. And we can learn a lot about a community and its members by deciphering both what actually historically happened to them and how they choose to interpret and communicate what has happened to themselves and to others. So we have to recognize that a disease that attacks our cognitive ability to remember also plays a role in how we live our lives Jewishly, how we identify as Jews. At Passover each year, we are called upon to remember the Exodus, to associate the telling of the story so closely that we are to actually engage with the collective memory of the Jewish people. And this is a challenging task for anyone, and even more so for someone whose cognitive ability to remember is already a source of frustration and confusion. So as we are learning from Dr. Coleman this evening, I asked us to analyze the conversation not only through the practical and through the analytical perspectives, but also through a Jewish lens, that there is something inherently Jewish about the Luke Sklar Mental Health Initiative hosting a program on understanding dementia for ourselves and for our loved ones. And so with that, I want to invite Doreen Saskin to the live stream. She's one of the members of the Luke Sklar Mental Health Initiative. And Doreen, I'm going to ask you to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Sarah Coleman is a geriatric psychiatrist. She completed her undergraduate degree in the Arts and Science Honors Program at McMaster University and her medical degree, psychiatry residency, and clinical fellowship in geriatric psychiatry at the University of Toronto. She is currently a staff psychiatrist on the geriatric inpatient unit at CAMH, that is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, where she also enjoys teaching medical students and residents. As well, she engages in outreach work to frail, homebound seniors. Dr. Coleman is the president of the Medical Staff Association at CAMH. She also recently completed her tenure as the Associate Program Director for the Department of Psychiatry at U of T. Her interests include medical education, medical history, ethics and the medical-legal interface in psychiatry, and advocacy for vulnerable older adults. She is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and, most importantly, is the proud mama of 3 quirky kids. Her words, not mine. So, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sarah Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doreen and Rabbi Goodman. I'm going to, first of all, just thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. I think this initiative is really important, wonderful way of working towards ending stigma against those who suffer from mental illness. So I was very inspired when I read about this initiative, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So thank you so much for asking me to come speak tonight. Going to share my screen. I know often at these talks, we start with someone who's had lived experience. And so I'd like to start with my own lived experience with dementia. So here we have a picture of my grandmother, Esther Safer Fisher. This is her brother, Leon. This is her brother, Morley. She's probably around the age of my middle daughter, Shayna, in this picture. And she is one of sort of the mentors and inspirations of my life. And unfortunately, towards the end of her life, she struggled with dementia. So I want to talk about her and show you some photographs. So here she is looking young and beautiful. And I suppose this must be my mother in this picture, although it looks a lot like me and also like my children. This is a picture of her at the cottage. My grandfather had built a cottage up north of Huntsville, and this is one of the favorite places where she would live. She had so many skills, but was really sort of at home at the cottage. I'm gonna talk more about, I'll just talk about the pictures first, then talk a little bit more about her life. I'm just gonna get rid of my face so I'm not looking at myself. Here, I think, is a picture of her at her 85th birthday with my grandfather. And here's a picture when she had advanced dementia. I was living in Kensington Gardens long-term care, and she's meeting my youngest child, or probably not meeting for the first time, but I'm coming to visit with Yona when she was a baby. Yona's now 6. So Esther was born in Toronto. She became a nurse and met my grandfather. She was engaged to someone else. She was engaged, I think, to an obstetrician, and my grandfather was her patient. He had some kind of minor operation, and she was his nurse, and they fell in love. And within a few months, I think, she had broken off the engagement with this other gentleman, and they were married, and they had a wonderful marriage of over 65 years. She went back to school and became a public health nurse. I can only imagine what kind of work she'd be doing right now during this pandemic. And then she went back to school again and she became an English professor. So she graduated when she was 50 years old with a PhD in English. She also published in many different places, but including the Globe and Mail, many recipes. So she was a wonderful cook, and she published she had sort of books, like recipe books, and published regularly in the Globe and Mail. There was an article that she would do on a regular basis around recipes. And she was an excellent Scrabble player. So I knew there was something wrong when I beat her at Scrabble. We had played Scrabble for many years, and one day I beat her at Scrabble. And it wasn't that my Scrabble was better, because nobody could beat her at Scrabble. It was that her Scrabble was getting worse. And I watched over the following years as this sort of proud, brilliant, fierce woman became really cognitively impaired and had a lot of the very difficult symptoms of dementia that we see. So we think about dementia often as having to do with memory, but it's not only memory. Memory is only one part of our cognition. And so she also experienced paranoia. She experienced delusions. She was aggressive. I mean, she was always a fierce woman. So I feel like her fierceness came out in different ways. And it was really, really a difficult struggle. And I remember, I went into geriatric psychiatry before she developed dementia, probably because of my amazing relationship with her and my grandfather, sort of allowing me to understand that working in this population is so meaningful and important. But I remember using my skills when we needed to get her out of the house to get her to long-term care. And she had a lot of what we call negativism. So oftentimes when people have dementia, they just say no to everything. And we had to get her sort of step by step down the stairs, out into the car, one little baby step at a time, so that we could get her to a place that was safer for her, where she could live her final months. I was with her the night before she died. And she actually died on my birthday, which was sad. I'll tell one story. So my son came into the room the morning she had died, and said, "Mom, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed, I made my bed, now can I go watch TV?" Because we had this is what we needed to do. And I said, "Morris, Nanny died, right?" And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then he said, "I brushed my teeth, I got dressed, I made my bed, now can I go watch TV?" And then my daughter, who was in bed with me, said, "It's Mommy's birthday." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, Mommy, your grandma died and it was on your birthday." She was really old and it was her time to go, but that's still really sad. And I thought that was so true. And the woman that I remember is not the woman in those later years, although that is a part of her. But the woman who sort of gave me her engagement ring and said, "If you wear this and I wear it, it's the same thing," when I got engaged to my husband, and who taught me so very much about how to live a full, meaningful, rich life. So in her honor, I'm going to talk about dementia. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have afterwards. So cognitive impairment and dementia, it's present in 20% of the elderly population, and it's consistently rated among the top 3 concerns of older people. It's a pretty scary thing to think about. What is dementia? So oftentimes people will say, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? So I'm gonna just very quickly go through the little bit of the lingo. So dementia is the same thing in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is like the Bible for psychiatrists of all the different psychiatric disorders. They're now calling it, in the most recent edition, major neurocognitive disorder, but it's the same thing. Major neurocognitive disorder and dementia, they mean the same thing. And they're an umbrella term for all these other types of dementia. So Alzheimer's dementia is a type of dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is a type. Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia. You can have dementia because of having had a brain injury, because of using too many substances or alcohol, because of a variety of other disorders. And basically what dementia is chronic brain failure. So if you think of chronic heart failure, dementia is chronic brain failure. So over time, the brain is failing. And the brain, as I said earlier, is not only responsible for memory, but for so many other things. And so we'll talk about the ways in which that impacts someone's ability to function in the world. So in the DSM, they taught, this is a lot of fancy doctor words, but I'm just going to highlight those that are in red. So you need to have significant cognitive decline. And we know that someone has significant cognitive decline either when they're worried about it, when a knowledgeable informant, so maybe a family member or a good close friend is worried about it, or the clinician is worried about it. And there's a substantial impairment, so not just a little, but in cognitive performance, and you can measure that on tests, on objective tests. And those cognitive deficits interfere with independence in everyday activities. So you can no longer do the things you used to be able to do. So if you just have some cognitive impairment, but it doesn't impact your functioning, it is not dementia. It only becomes dementia or major neurocognitive disorder if it impacts your functioning. It can't only occur in the context of a delirium. So a delirium is more of an acute brain failure when you have some kind of medical problem that impacts your thinking in your brain, and acutely you have a brain failure, and that can resolve when that medical problem goes away. And it's also not explained better by a different kind of disorder like depression or schizophrenia or some other mental disorder that's causing you to have problems with your thinking and cognition. So cognitive domains, it's not just your memory. So you see here on this list, they don't even put memory by itself. Memory goes along with learning. Your brain is also responsible for paying attention to many different things, for your executive functions. That's the front part of your brain where it's like the executive of your body. It helps you with organizing. It helps you with planning. It helps you with inhibiting things that you maybe shouldn't say or do, holding back. And when that deteriorates, you'll see people behaving in ways that might be embarrassing, swearing more or saying things that are maybe not so appropriate in public. It can impact language. It can impact your ability to function, to walk, to be able to do the various physical activities that you used to be able to do, like remember how to pick up a fork and bring it to your mouth to eat. And also social cognition is an aspect of cognition. So your ability to interact with others appropriately in a social way. And all of those can be impacted and can be called dementia. So you can have dementia without having any memory difficulties. Alzheimer's dementia usually starts with memory difficulties, and it's the most common kind of dementia. So that's why we think of dementia as being a memory disease, but it's not only a memory disease. So I know someone had asked about warning signs, and I don't want people to get anxious. So I want everyone to remember that it is very important that these problems impact your functioning. And we can talk a little bit about what's normal memory changes or cognitive changes with aging as well. But if you're seeing memory loss that impacts day-to-day abilities, if you have difficulty or your loved one has difficulty performing familiar tasks that they used to be able to do, if they're having significant problems with their language that wasn't there before, if they're getting disoriented in time and space. So I remember taking my grandmother to get her hearing aid fixed, and she couldn't she didn't know what the date was, or she was confused about like what to put on the form in the area that said date. So disorientation in time and space is a concern. If judgment starts to change, or you're not able to think abstractly, you become more concrete. So it's harder to think about like the big questions of the universe and things that are like more higher order thinking. If you misplace things, but like everybody, I misplaced my keys. I had to come back after I left the house to get my wallet this morning. If you're finding your keys in the freezer, though, that's another story, right? So you're misplacing things in strange places that isn't normal sort of busyness of life and putting things in the wrong place. If there are significant changes in mood and behavior that aren't explained otherwise, if someone's personality starts to significantly change, or if they have a loss of initiative, so that's what we call apathy that we see in dementia, and I like to think of it as your get up and go has got up and gone. So people will often ask me if this person is depressed, but they're not depressed. They're perfectly content to sit around and not do very much. That's called apathy, and it's one of the symptoms of dementia. So if someone were to come to me and I were going to give them a diagnosis of dementia, which I would not do lightly, these are the steps I would take. I would take a medical history, so taking the whole person into consideration, learning about their life from the beginning all the way up till now, as well as all of their medical problems. I would ask them about specific concerns around their memory. So if they're forgetting to use the right words, or if they have trouble finding the right words, trouble finding people's names, if they're repeating themselves over and over again, if they're getting lost, things that we worry about significantly when it comes to safety in older adults is whether or not when they're cooking, they're forgetting. Now, again, I have to frequently come and turn off the stove in the kitchen because my husband leaves it on, and I'm not concerned that he has dementia. But if they're forgetting and leaving it on and causing food to burn on a regular basis, or there are fires that are being set in the kitchen, or if they're leaving the taps on in the bathroom and there have been floods, or they're getting locked out of the house because they forgot their keys and it's repeating over and over again. These are the kinds of things I would worry about. And I also want to get a sense of how this has happened. So is it all of a sudden that a change happened? Has it been sort of a stepwise, like down, 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 or has it been a slow progression over time? And often we'll want to interview a family member or caregiver separate from the person who has dementia, although it's always important to involve everyone as much as possible. Sometimes people aren't as open or frank if they're all in the same room, and they might worry about embarrassing someone or bringing up things that are embarrassing if they're together. So we'll try and do that separately. Then there's a basic physical examination and some laboratory tests, but the diagnosis is really made with the history. There are a few things you want to rule out. So you want to see if they've had it, like we can do physical exam to see if someone's obviously had a stroke or something that could be contributing to these difficulties. And there are some kinds of labs that you can reverse dementia. So 2 examples would be if someone's thyroid was totally out of whack and you replaced it, you might be able to reverse dementia. If someone's B12 level was very, very low, and you replace their B12, you might be able to reverse dementia, but it's rare. And so you want to rule those things out, if their calcium was really high. So there are a few things, but mostly it's just to make sure that we're not missing any of those big issues. And then you do some brief cognitive tests. I'll talk about that in a minute. And for some people, you do some structural imaging, some brain imaging, a CT, a CAT scan, or an MRI, and I'll talk about that as well. But first, we'll pause for a quote from Michael Ignatieff. She remembers the summer nights when her father used to wrap her in a blanket and take her to the edge of Otter Lake to see the stars, but she can't dice an onion. She can't boil a kettle of water. Any sustained course of action requires more concentration than she can muster. Oftentimes, people who have Alzheimer's dementia will remember their autobiographical history. So they'll remember all kinds of things from their childhood, but their short-term memory will go first. They won't remember something that happened yesterday or even 5 minutes ago. So here's one example of a brief cognitive test. It is the MOCA. It is the famous MOCA that Donald Trump took and scored perfectly on, or I'm not sure if we know the score, but he would have said that he scored perfectly on it, that became famous. And these tests have their place. So they are most useful to be used over time. They're also quite hard. So someone with a lower level of education could have a low score on this test and not have dementia. And someone with a really high level of education could have a perfect score on this test and still have dementia. But what it's useful for is over time, watching and seeing if there is a decline through the years. There are lots of other ways that you can try and figure out whether or not someone's got cognitive impairment without putting them through this test, because this test is also quite anxiety provoking for people to do. And so I try and avoid doing it unless I have to, but I do use it sometimes. You need to remember that when someone's doing this, and if they're not doing well on it, it can be a very scary experience for them. So people often feel like they want to have brain imaging. The unfortunate situation is that someone could have a really terrible looking brain and not have dementia at all. And someone could have a perfectly pristine looking brain and have terrible Alzheimer's, for example. So brain imaging isn't actually that useful. There are certain situations in which someone should get brain imaging. If they're less than 60 years old and they're having cognitive impairment, it's important to get imaging. If it's a very rapid decline that doesn't sort of fit a normal picture, then you'd want to get imaging. If they had recent head trauma, you would want to get imaging because there might be a bleed that's reversible if it were drained. Similarly, if they have a bleeding disorder or they're on blood thinners, again, you would want to make sure that there isn't a bleed in the brain that's causing some cognitive impairment that's reversible. If they have a history of cancer that might spread to the brain, you'd want to make sure that that isn't what's going on. And if there's anything that's unusual or unexplained or different from what someone would usually see in a dementia, that's when you would use an image of the brain, a CAT scan or an MRI. But for the average person who's coming with a classic history of an Alzheimer's type dementia or a vascular, meaning small blood vessel disease dementia, you wouldn't necessarily need brain imaging. And it wouldn't actually change management in any way. I'll go through, I had other slides. I mean, there are various different ways of looking at the stages of dementia, and this really is for Alzheimer's, although by the end, all the different kinds of dementias look the same. I thought I'd just break it into three, and this is the Alzheimer's Society that did this for me, so I'm not going to take credit for it, rather than like the 7 that we sometimes see. They wouldn't fit on the slide, but I'm happy to talk in more detail about stages later if people would like. So early on, people will have some forgetfulness. They might have some difficulty with communicating. They might be forgetting what words to use or not understanding when other people speak to them, what they said. And they may have some changes in mood and behavior, but they retain many of their abilities and they don't need very much assistance at all. Remember, they need some assistance, because if they didn't need assistance, they wouldn't have dementia, but they don't need much of it. And they may have insight. And if they do, and even if they don't, it's a stage where people can help to plan and direct their future care. And I'm going to talk more about that because that is so very important, even before we develop dementia, to be thinking about planning and directing our own future care, so that when the situation comes when we can no longer express what we would like, we have had those conversations of what our values are, what we would want in specific situations. And we often don't like talking about these subjects because they make us very anxious. And so we avoid it. And then the situation happens and our loved ones don't know what to do and don't know what we would have wanted. So having those conversations early is really important. I'm going to talk about that again in a few slides. As dementia progresses, people start to need more and more assistance. So they might need assistance with managing their money, with going shopping, with helping to clean around their home. As it progresses further, they'll need assistance with even more basic activities like dressing themselves or bathing themselves or reminding them how to use the toilet or bringing them to the toilet to use it. And at this stage, wandering becomes a concern. And so one practical suggestion I would have is there's the Medic Alert Safely Home program, which you can register for, in which you wear a Medic Alert bracelet and you're registered, the person who has dementia is registered, so that if they do wander, they can be returned back to where they should be, and they don't sort of end up in a dangerous situation. And finally, there's the late stage. And again, so other dementias might look different at the beginning, but by the end, they all look the same. And at this point in time, people really cannot communicate verbally. They cannot look after themselves at all. They require full care. They require someone to feed them. They stop being able to walk, and they require care 24 hours a day. I'll talk a bit about the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. This is an area that I work with a lot as a psychiatrist, as a geriatric psychiatrist. There's many different names that people have for it. So another term that people use is reactive behaviors or responsive behaviors, indicating that these behaviors are actually a response to something, even if it doesn't seem like they make much sense to us. There's another term, which is neuropsychiatric symptoms. And here are some of them. The ones that I see that are most concerning to people and destructive to families are aggression and agitation. Wandering, we already talked about. People can be very restless. People who have dementia can have hallucinations. They can become quite paranoid. So if someone is older and they start to tell you that things are being stolen from them, it's dementia unless proven otherwise. So the brain is very smart. It will make up stories to make sense of the world. So if you misplace something and you don't remember where it was misplaced and you don't realize that you have a memory difficulty, your brain makes up a story to tell you that this item has been stolen. And often the paranoia is directed at those who are closest to the person with dementia, because they're the ones who are the most in their life. And so it can be very difficult for family members when their loved one starts to become paranoid about them. They might make unexpected noises, or they might just become very, very withdrawn. And I already mentioned apathetic. So just not really being interested in doing very much at all, but it's not that they're depressed, it's just that they've lost their gumption. So how do we treat dementia? So the first thing is we try to get rid of medications. The first thing to look at is what kinds of treatments is someone already taking that's actually making their cognition worse before we add anything on. I mean, older adults get prescribed way too many medications, and there are lots of evidence to show that when you're on too many medications, they start to talk to each other and it causes more trouble than good most of the time. So sedatives, people may have been on their sedatives, their lorazepam for years and years and years, and now their brain has changed and it's making them more cognitively impaired. Or strong pain medications. Over-the-counter medications like Sleepies or Gravol is my least favorite, that it really can make people very confused. And other medications, very big word, anticholinergic medications, but the most common ones are being given for incontinence. So someone might have difficulty with continence and they're given a medication to help dry them up, and that makes them more confused. And you can stop that medication, use an alternative that's less dangerous to the brain, and someone's cognition gets better. So you want to stop those things that are causing the trouble. I will talk more. I actually didn't talk much about alcohol, so I will talk more about alcohol in a little bit. I'll talk about it both when it comes to prevention and when it comes to treatment. Medications for dementia. So these medications have a modest impact. So there's donepezil, galantamine, rivastigmine, and memantine. Donepezil is also called Aricept, people may have heard of. They have a modest benefit. So what I'll tell my patients usually is that, these medications have evidence for someone who's living in the community, keeping them in the community and not requiring long-term care or a retirement home for about 6 more months on average than those who don't use it. So people who have a decline that's going sort of down on a slope like this, the medication might make them go down on a slope like this. The medications don't treat the dementia, but they might slow the progression of the dementia. And then finally, you want to treat other medical or psychiatric problems that are contributing to the dementia. So the biggest one that we know of that can be helpful early on and then later is treating high blood pressure. But also if someone has a depression that's worsening their dementia, you'd want to treat that. And if someone has behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia that I mentioned earlier, you need to treat those symptoms. And sometimes you need to treat those symptoms with medications. I want to speak about hearing loss because this is something that I deal with a lot. I already mentioned I took my grandmother to get her hearing tested, and that's where it was one of the times that I saw that she couldn't remember to write the date on the form. There is a significant association between hearing loss and cognitive decline. Now, that does not mean that hearing loss causes cognitive decline. We don't actually know what the chicken or the egg is. We don't know if you have hearing loss, you don't lay down memories quite as well. Your brain kind of gets a bit lazy, and so it's more likely for you to get more cognitively impaired faster. Or that the hearing loss is just a sign that your brain is slowly deteriorating, and so it's also deteriorating in the areas that are responsible for hearing. And so it's just showing you that there's a deterioration happening, but it might be a bit of both. Either way, it makes it much harder to communicate when you can't hear. And so treating that can significantly improve people's quality of life. I have a picture here. I have no stocks in pocket talkers or anything, but I have a picture here of a pocket talker because people hate hearing aids. They hate them. Nobody wears them. The batteries die and they get blocked up. And I mean, maybe some people do, smart people wear them, but many, many people that I meet will not wear their hearing aids. This is a device that is very inexpensive that you can buy, and you put it on your ears, and then you can, when you're in places, you can hear what's going on. I use it when I have patients who have Parkinson's disease. When people have advanced Parkinson's disease, they start to speak very, very quietly. And so I use it so I can hear them, and it feels like I have superpowers because I can hear everything. It's really quite amazing. So if you have someone who refuses to wear hearing aids and you'd like to be able to have a conversation with them that's not a struggle, you could consider a pocket talker. It's kind of like an iPod. Maybe they'd be more willing to try that. It just goes over your ears. So treating responsive behaviors or BPSD. So these are the agitation or aggression or calling out, etc. You don't start with medications. The first thing you want to do is look at what happened right before the event. Then you want to get a sense of what happens during the event, and then what happened after the event. So maybe it's happening, maybe your loved one is becoming aggressive or biting, when they're getting ready for the bath. And it's happening every time they're getting ready for the bath. And you're not sure how to manage it. So then you can try different little experiments like making the room warmer or, changing the way the bathroom is in order to adjust that. Maybe it's happening every time their daughter-in-law is coming to visit. You might not want to share that with the daughter-in-law, but these are the kinds of things where you want to get a kind of a pattern and understand what's happening so that you can put together a plan to try and address these without using medicines. And there's a mnemonic called PIECES, physical, intellectual, emotional capabilities, environment, social actions of others, PIECES. I'm not going to go into details about it, but there's like a framework that you can look up and use to try and really understand where these behaviors are coming from and come up with a plan to address them. And then finally, if you've tried all that and it's not working, and if someone's suffering significantly, you can consider medications to manage things like aggression and agitation. But these are hardcore medications that come with very significant risks. Happy to talk about the details later. And so one really needs to weigh risks and benefits as to whether or not you want to use these medicines. There is a time and a place for them, especially if you're looking at ensuring someone has a quality of life rather than quantity of life, but there are also significant risks. So I'll speak a minute about the dyad. So this is a picture of both of my grandparents, Grandpa Irv and my grandmother Esther. In any situation where one person is dependent significantly on the other, we call that a dyad, and you need to treat both members of the dyad. So if the caregiver, the one who's being depended on, is not doing well because they are overwhelmed and they are tired because they're not sleeping and they are stressed, then the person who has dementia is also not going to do as well. They're going to be more likely to be aggressive. They're going to be more likely to decline faster. And so it is very, very important to support the entire system of those who are involved in a person who has dementia. And this is not just partners, it's also children, it's also friends. You know, it is when someone has this disabling disease, the entire system needs to be treated, and it is a marathon, not a sprint. So it is so important for caregivers to take time to themselves and take care of themselves so they have the strength, the koach, to take care of the person who requires the caring. So a few options to help with that are the Reitman Center for Carers based at Mount Sinai Hospital. They have an 8-week program. It's now all online. They've also trained folks in many different settings, but that's where the source is, where the caregiver learns problem-solving therapy, as well as they get to work with actors who enact their loved one or other situations that they're in, and they can practice behaving differently with their loved one than they are now to see if that can change the trajectory of how conversations go, of the dynamics in the home when struggling with this very difficult illness. The other amazing resource is the Alzheimer's Society. So they have so much literature that is really high quality online. It's a problem that it's called the Alzheimer's Society because it's not only for Alzheimer's, it's for all forms of dementia, and you can find anything you want to read about. They also have social workers who can provide support. They have a link to the iPod project, which provides music to people who have dementia that they love, which can help decrease behaviors. All kinds of amazing resources available at the Alzheimer's Society, and talks, etc. They have support groups for those who have milder stages of dementia so that they can feel less isolated and alone. So I recommend them as well. And then a really great book that people can read is called The 36-Hour Day. It's very against psychiatric medications, and that's okay with me. That's my one criticism of the book, because I use them sometimes and I think there's a time and a place. But other than that, it's a really wonderful book, and it really helps empower people who are going through this experience to know how to seek help, when to seek help, what questions to ask when they're navigating the system. I think this is, 2 more slides. And so I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. So I mentioned this a little bit already. So advanced care planning. So I cannot stress enough how important it is for all of us to talk to our family members about what we would want to have done for us should we not be able to speak for ourselves. And once a disease has progressed significantly, it's too late to do it, and it's never too early to start. So advancedcareplanning.ca has a wonderful module that you can work through at your own pace. It talks about difficult conversations, but it goes through what your values are, what you would want in various different settings. It's online, you can save it, you can share it with your family members so that they can be aware of it, and you can print it up, etc., so that it's very, very clear and you've had this conversation. Also, dementia it's a disease that it ends in death eventually. And so putting DNR forms, thinking about do not resuscitate forms when you no longer would want to be brought to hospital if you were to have a medical problem, or you wouldn't want to have CPR, intubation, and ventilation. Having those printed up, available in a clear place in your home is also a very important thing to do when it gets to that stage. Then you need to talk about death and talk about what you'd want in those situations in order to be able to plan for it and have a good experience of death. And finally, power of attorney. I'm going backwards up my slide, but similarly, you can choose who will make decisions for you when you're not able to make decisions for yourself. And this can be both with respect to finances and also with respect to personal care. And if you give someone a power of attorney for finances and personal care, they can't make the decisions for you until you're not able to make them for yourself. I'll just say, if you lose the ability to manage your finances on your own and you don't have a power of attorney for personal care in place for your finances, the government will take over before your family member does. So it's very important to put that in place. If you don't have one for personal care, there's a little algorithm that looks at like your next of kin, and there's a hierarchy for next of kin as to who gets to make the decision. But if you want to have your own say, it's very important to arrange your power of attorney for yourself and to talk about this early and to talk about it often. And finally, the big question is, how can we prevent dementia? So there isn't a great answer to this. There's one good study called the Finger study that happened in the Netherlands, I think it was, where they were able to show that by using a combination of having it was very intense personal trainers and a Mediterranean diet and not smoking and other various activities, that all of those put together could prevent someone from progressing from some mild cognitive impairment to developing dementia. So it's very motherhood and apple pie. So starting early in life, you want to, and continuing on, you want to be exercising. People ask about all different kinds of diets. The one that has the most evidence is the Mediterranean diet. So a diet that is low in red meats, high in whole grains, in fish, in vegetables. If you smoke, you should stop smoking, and there's a smoking cessation program at CanH that I will advertise that provides free nicotine replacement therapy. And if you don't smoke, then you should not start smoking, because it's very clear that smoking has a negative impact on your many, many different parts of your life. Manage high blood pressure. There isn't really clear evidence around cholesterol or anything, but there is around high blood pressure. And keeping your mind active. People will often ask about whether or not they should be doing luminosity or things like that. And what I'll say is, it's not the luminosity, it's that luminosity keeps your mind active. So if you have other ways of keeping your mind active, people like playing bridge, people like engaging in healthy debate, those are equally good. If you don't like doing crossword puzzles, you don't need to start doing crossword puzzles, but if you like doing crossword puzzles, great, do your crossword puzzles. You can play Scrabble to help keep your mind active. One that's missing here is also keeping social, and that is very difficult. Now, I haven't talked about COVID a lot. I might when it comes to the question and answer period. It is very difficult for all of us to be social right now. And so figuring out ways to be social as best you can, despite the limitations that we have, is also really, really important. So keeping your mind active by doing things that make you do little puzzles and work with your thinking, and also by having a good social connection to other people. Alcohol. What I've been taught and what I live by is that a mild to moderate amount of alcohol is actually okay. A couple of glasses of wine here and there is actually okay. You would never tell someone who doesn't drink alcohol to start drinking alcohol. And it's very clear that too much alcohol can cause dementia. There's a specific kind of dementia, classic kind, that can be caused by someone who has a significant alcohol use disorder. But if you drink a glass of wine with dinner, or you drink, 2 glasses of wine once in a while, or any kind of alcohol, really, the wine doesn't matter, that's okay. The problem starts to happen when you develop your cognitive impairment and you think, oh, I'll have my glass of wine for dinner. And then you forgot that you had a glass of wine for dinner, and you think, oh, I'll have my glass of wine for dinner again. And I will sometimes see people who develop alcohol use disorder later in life because they don't remember that they actually had their drink. So a little bit of alcohol is okay, and too much is not. That is the end of the formal part of my talk, but I'm very happy to open it up for any questions. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Hey, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Coleman. That was very clear, and I think you gave us a more practical understanding of dementia for the carers or caregivers. I like the fact that you also shared some of your personal stories. I think that really brings things to light, and we're grateful that you've taken the time to share this knowledge with us. So I have received some questions in advance, and as well, we're looking at some of the questions that have been posted on the chat. I know your talk was very thorough, so I hope we're not duplicating any of the things that you've already talked about, but I know some of our registrants really wanted to get specific answers. So you can continue to add questions to the chat box as we continue on. Okay, so the first question, and I think that it really resonated with most people, was how and when do you take your parents' car keys away?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. So first of all, I'll say you maybe shouldn't be taking your parents' car keys away, right? Because your relationship with your parents or spouse or whoever it is too important for you to be the bad person to take their car keys away. But what you can do is bring them to a medical professional like me. I'm happy to be the bad guy and have me take their car keys away, because that's my job. It's the least favorite part of my job. It's the part of my job that I hate, but I'd rather do it than someone's kids. And the question as to when to do it, there's the grandchild test, and not everyone has grandchildren, but if you think about it this way, like, would you let your grandkids or your kids ride in the car with the grandmother or grandfather? If you feel comfortable, there wouldn't be an issue with them riding in the car, maybe it's not a concern. If you have any sort of hesitancy about letting them ride in the car, then they should not be driving. They should not be driving, and someone should be doing some kind of assessment to make sure that they are safe. I might share, like, we had experience in my extended family of someone who had a big car accident when maybe they shouldn't be driving, and you shouldn't wait until that point. It's important to try and stop that in advance.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I like that grandchild test. So when you start to suspect that someone you love may have the early signs of forgetfulness and the things that you discussed, who is the first professional that you would go to? What are the steps involved?
So, I mean, I think it depends. I think there's no right answer there. I think going to your family doctor as a first step is probably what I would suggest in most cases. You know, hopefully they have a connection to be able, if it's needed, to link to somebody else. So I would start with a family doctor. Again, if you have questions or concerns, you can also go to the Alzheimer's Society and speak to one of the workers there who can help you to navigate the system and figure out what might be best in the situation that you're in. But yeah, I would start with family doctor before going and jumping the queue to a specialist, when it might not necessarily be necessary.
Okay, thank you. You talked about the Mediterranean diet. There was a question about this gut-brain connection. Does sugar play a role in starting dementia, or do some diets cause dementia? Can you embellish that?
So I don't think there's clear evidence that sugar plays a role in causing dementia. I don't think there's clear evidence that, like, gluten plays a role in causing dementia. I think, you know, the evidence that there isn't, you know, vitamin E doesn't help. There were like hopes around that. The only evidence that there is with diet is, like I said, like a Mediterranean diet has the most evidence. But not forbidding any kinds of foods. And then there are specific sort of, if you're missing key things in your diet, so if you don't have enough vitamin B12, for example, it can look like you have dementia. So you want to make sure you have a well-rounded diet, and vitamin D, vitamin B12 are important to have. You don't need to take vitamin B12 if your vitamin B12 level is fine, but if it's not, then you might need a supplement. But there isn't, you know, I know there is a lot in popular culture out there about these things, but from what I've seen so far, there isn't clear evidence that that sugar or gluten or those kinds of things are the culprits in causing dementia.
Okay. And someone else, just in the same vein, talked about any kind of poisoning, mercury poisoning, lead poisoning, mold exposure?
So it's true. If someone actually had mercury poisoning or lead poisoning, then they could develop dementia because of that.
Yeah.
I think the amounts would have to be fairly, like they would have to have poisoning and not just sort of trace amounts that sort of available. But it is important to rule that out if it's sort of a strange looking dementia, or if it seems like multiple members of the house are having difficulties. That would show up earlier if there were concerns around that.
Okay, thanks. There were several questions regarding communicating with your loved one. You talked about the dyad, you have to support both individuals. And so many of our viewers discussed having a lot of difficulty communicating where the person in the advanced stages of dementia became angry and frustrated. And they talked about, should you tell the person that they have asked the same question over again? I already asked you that. Or should you go along with the fact that they're having hallucinations and actually agree or go along with it?
Yeah. So there's a way to try. So I can tell you what you should do, and then there's real life. And so when someone asks you something a million times, you're living with them, you might lose your temper and say, you already asked me that, and that's being human, and that's okay. It probably won't help though. It probably won't make them remember that they asked you. They might just ask you again in a few minutes, and then you might feel guilty that you snapped at them or whatever. So, and similarly, if someone has a delusion, to challenge that delusion and say, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, that's not going to work. What you can try and do instead is speak to the emotion behind the statement. So if someone is claiming that someone's stolen from them and is becoming angry, you can, oh, I have a little partner here. This is Yona, who was in that picture at the beginning, but now she's such a big girl. You can say, that must be really scary. You seem really scared right now. I'm going to help you with this, right? Or if they're asking the same question in an anxious way, you can say, you seem really worried. I'm going to help you, and here's how. And then distract them to do something else. And you may need to distract kind of over and over again. But instead of, you don't need to lie and agree with them about a delusion that they have, but you can speak to the feeling behind the words and validate that. And that can be helpful in helping you to speak with them. Mm-hmm. Challenging people and saying no and trying to remind them what's correct, that doesn't generally work. And people who have more advanced stages of dementia are very attuned to your emotional state, right? So if they're angry and you're tense and angry, then they will react and become more tense and angry. And if they're a little tense and angry, and I will often, it's very hard right now during COVID with my patients, but in general, if I see someone tense and angry and I say, hi, how are you? Then all of a sudden it can shift and they can become less angry and irritable, and the whole mood can change. So it's important to try, although very difficult, that's why it's so important with that marathon analogy, to take care of yourself so you have the strength to be calm and be friendly and not react to anger with tension, but instead try and react with a positive, calm response.
Okay, great, thank you. We can't end this evening without talking about COVID and its relation to dementia. We don't have to go into what is happening in long-term care homes and its effect on advancing of this disease, but I would like to ask you about the role in prolonged isolation, and have you seen an increase in prevalence since COVID began and people are really not engaging socially?
So I think, so my friend Andrea Iaboni, who works at UHN, she has done studies on like isolation and has like a toolkit to try and minimize isolation in people who are in long-term care like settings. And I think that's hugely important. We know from so many studies that any kind of prolonged isolation for any human is damaging to the brain. And so with those who have vulnerable brains, of course, it's going to be damaging to the brain. And anecdotally, like I don't know that we have the studies yet to show, or at least I'm not aware of them. They may exist already or be starting to come out. Anecdotally, for sure, I have seen declines, not necessarily more people developing dementia, but people who have dementia having more behavioral symptoms or having worsening cognition because of the prolonged isolation. And then in order to force people to sort of stay separate in these congregate settings, more medications are being used to try and sedate them so that they don't go and spread COVID throughout, which also can be damaging to cognition. So I'm not sure I have a great answer, unfortunately, for this. I mean, there are some programs out there. There are like volunteer programs that give phone calls. There are friendly visitor programs. There are all kinds of beautiful programs that are attempting to ameliorate this very difficult setting that we're in, but there's not a perfect answer. And I do hope as soon as possible, some already have, that like day programs and things like that reopen. They are so important for the caregiver's wellness, for the person with dementia's wellness, for decreasing that social isolation that we know is detrimental.
Yeah, it's almost like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
I'm going to save the last two questions or so, though we still have some more coming in. Maybe we'll just start with these shorter ones. The role of music and music therapy in care for those with dementia and Alzheimer's.
So I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on this, but I love music and I see it work beautifully. So there is a lot of evidence on it, but I don't know it off the top of my, like I don't have it at my fingertips. I do know that they have like, there's the reason that there is the iPod project, or maybe it's not called the iPod project, but something like that through the Alzheimer's Society, is because there's clear evidence that when people listen to music and familiar music to them and music that they enjoy, that it can help to decrease behavioral symptoms and help to improve quality of life. And it's also very clear that the location of your musical mind is different, like it's different than the rest of, how would I say this a little bit more professionally? Let's try that again. So music is sort of embedded in all different parts of your brain, and it's one of the last things to go. So when people have dementia and they can't speak, they can still sometimes sing along with songs that they knew before. Or people who enjoyed playing piano or playing music, they can still play those instruments even if they've lost the ability to like eat with a fork. So there's something magical about music where it is maintained far longer than other aspects of memory or other aspects of abilities. And there is evidence that it also helps to improve quality of life. But you need to make sure that you're not playing pop songs that someone finds grating if they would prefer opera, and that you're not playing opera for someone who would prefer punk rock. Right. So it needs to be catered to the individual for the most part, and you can always try and see. I mean, maybe you didn't know that they loved punk rock, and that's the thing that makes them happy.
Right. I'd just like to plug the ukulele group at Holy Blossom, because we, before COVID, were traveling around to the retirement residences and playing ukulele songs for the residents, and I could see those who were quite advanced in their dementia were actually singing along, and it was really nice to see. Otherwise, they were fairly nonverbal. So anyway, plug to the ukulele players. Okay.
One day soon, hopefully you can go back to doing that, because you can try and do it virtually and it's somewhat okay, but there's lots of benefits, but it's not quite the same.
Okay, so now I'm going to get to the tough question here. I think this deserves or requires a lot of careful consideration, and I think it deserves insight into medical ethics and a lot of discussion around it with a Jewish lens. So I know you talked about advanced care planning. I've got several questions here about that. But one of our registrants talked specifically about MAID, medical assistance in dying. I just, perhaps at this point, you can touch again on that, and Rabbi Goodman, you can participate and tell us your thoughts on that.
So when you sort of warned me about this just before this started, my response was, "Oi, that's a doozy." So, you know, and that like my bias. So I am very in favor of advanced directives, and I say to my family that when I have dementia, please don't think I'm having a party in my brain, and if I get a pneumonia, don't give me antibiotics and let me die. And at the same time, I'm very concerned around someone deciding that they would want to be killed or like given medical assistance in dying, that when they're not able to consciously make that decision. Right now, as it stands, the ruling is that you can't do advanced directives for medical assistance in dying, although that is, I understand, changing as we speak. And I understand that there's challenges and that is going to be opened up. I come from a place of having studied eugenics and having studied the history there, having concerns around and being in a public healthcare system where there is a financial motivation to not need to care for older adults who have advanced dementia, that there's a serious risk in people being pressured to choose medical assistance in dying as advanced care, and then, you know, they might have changed their mind in the last moment, and you can't undo what you've put in your advanced care directives. So I think it's a fraught issue. It's a concerning issue. This little monkey needs to go off my lap. She's being a little one. So it's a concerning issue, and I think we need to just think very, very, very carefully about it. And to me, there's a bit of a difference between being fully pro palliative care and not intervention and saying, I'm going to choose now that when I have dementia, I want my life to be ended. When you're a kind of a different person when you have dementia that you were before, your brain changes and you might be having a different experience at that point in time. So I'm all for advanced directives for many different decisions, and for that particular one, it gives me pause and makes me think twice and be a bit concerned about it. But that's just my opinion. I'm not saying I have the answer.
That's fine. Rabbi, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. So I'm not a medical ethicist, and I don't pretend to have any expertise in this field. I just wanted to offer a Jewish frame. And the frame is this, like Dr. Coleman just said, it is such a nuanced conversation. And it's a conversation that we expected to have come up in questions tonight, and one that we knew we wouldn't really have enough time to fully address. And I often get questions about what is the Jewish perspective here. And it's true with this situation and many other situations with ethical dilemmas in Judaism, that there is no Jewish perspective, or there is no one Jewish perspective, but rather there are many Jewish perspectives. And in order for us to really come to some sort of Jewish lens or some sort of Jewish definitive answer here, which I'll tell you, there is no definitive answer, it would require months of study. So I did want to mention, we do talk about this in the Melton Florence School. We have a discussion in end-of-life decisions and ethics. There's also the Melton School offers a wonderful medical ethics course. And so there are lots of ways to study about this decision through a Jewish lens. And thank you, Dr. Coleman, for your insights here as well. I'm going to turn my screen back off.
Sure. I think we'll sort of close the Q&A. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, but there will be an opportunity in the email that you'll be getting after tonight's webinar. I just want to again thank you, Dr. Coleman, for responding so well to all these questions and comments. You did a wonderful job. I know that some of you who have joined us tonight have prior knowledge of this disease, and others are joined us as they embark on these new challenges of caring with someone with dementia and memory loss. I hope that we've provided you with more knowledge and some tools to assist you in caring for a loved one with dementia. For those who have registered, you will receive a survey in the next day or so. Please take the time to fill it out. It will come by email. And it also helps us to plan future programs. So if you could just take the time to fill it out. In the survey as well, there will be some resources. I will try to get the ones that Dr. Coleman mentioned. I have a few already. And you will see these resources on the website, the Holy Blossom website, under the Sklar Mental Health Initiative banner. Following the session, again, if you would like to speak to a social worker from JF and CS with your concerns, you may reach them via the email I think that we posted in the chat, or Rabbi Goodman will direct you to one of them. So thank you again, JF and CS, for offering your services. We very much appreciate the contributions that you have made to the Sklar Mental Health Initiative Fund. It allows us to educate and support the community in the areas of mental health. The members of the Sklar Mental Health Initiative Committee have also contributed to this fund in honor of Dr. Coleman's generous talk this evening. So thank you so much, Dr. Coleman. I just want to show you the book that Dr. Coleman recommended. The library at Holy Blossom, our beautiful new library, which we will eventually get back into, has an area that we've dedicated to topics of mental health and mental illness. It's there's a sort of a card in a dedicated area for books and any references from our past and hopefully our future series. And so I've added this one to the collection. And so once we can get back inside, you're welcome to enjoy it. I noticed there was a lot of references to the questions that were asked tonight, so that might really help. So thank you to the committee for purchasing this. And as well, I just want to mention one of our committee members, Cheryl Sylvester, recommended a book, Dementia Reimagined by Tia Powell, and it speaks to the trajectory of the illness and also to care implications on a personal and healthcare system-wide basis. So I'll put that in the resources as well. And finally, I want to wish you, on behalf of our committee, I wish everyone well. Hope you find strength as you care for your loved ones with dementia and memory loss. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. Take care.